This is the Brave New Coin Crypto Conversation, hosted by Andy Pickering.
Hi everyone, Andy Pickering here. I'm your host and welcome to the Crypto Conversation, a Brave New Coin podcast where we talk to the people building the future in the Bitcoin, blockchain and cryptocurrency space. Hi everyone, I know we're all hurting right now. Crypto has taken a beating, and Goldman Sachs says flatlining is the best case for stock-heavy portfolios. Flatlining? Zero returns? Sheesh. In situations like these, we can take a cue from the world's best investors, because a groundbreaking Ernst & Young study last year revealed that 8 in 10 ultra-high net worth individuals invest in alternatives. However, Bank of America's CIO recommends investing in one specific high-performing alternative to rescue your cash. He's talking about fine art. 2/3 of millionaires already hedge against inflation with art, according to UBS, because the last time inflation was this high, art appreciated by an unprecedented 33.2% annually. Now, obviously, most folks don't exactly have tens of millions lying around to start buying Banksys and Basquiat's, but that's where Masterworks comes in. They're helping people keep their cash intact by offering fractional investments in the top 1% of the art world. And with a recession on the horizon, they've seen sign-ups increase by 320%. That, combined with the fact that they speak to every investor to make sure art is right for them. That means there's a wait list, but I'm hooking you guys up with priority access to skip the line, and it's as easy as going to masterworks.com and using promo code CryptoConversation. That's masterworks.com, promo code CryptoConversation, and you can see important Regulation A disclosures at masterworks.com/CD. Again, that's masterworks.com, and use the promo code CryptoConversation to skip the line. And now, folks, it is on with the show. My guest today is Phillip Shoemaker. Phillip is actually a former Apple App Store director, which is quite intriguing, but he is now the executive director at Identity.com, which is a non-profit organization pioneering pseudonymous on-chain identity verification for Web3. So fascinating to chat about all this today. Welcome to the show, Phillip.
Thank you, Andy. Great to be here.
So to begin with, Phillip, I suppose it would be useful for me, certainly fascinating for the listeners, just to love to understand, I suppose, your transition, if you like, from working at Apple over across to working in Web3. So what has inspired that move? Why your interest in pseudonymity? God, that's a weird word for me today.
It is a hard one.
So, yeah, essentially, why have you left your position at Apple to work for a non-profit?
Yeah, one of the things that I always enjoyed about the internet is people's ability to make money, right? That was one of the key things about it. Sure, there's communication, all these other things, but that's what drove me to Apple, right? That's what got me to the App Store in the first place. I was the first director hired in to build and run the App Store. And the thing that launched me there was, it was a tough time for people. It was 2008, the housing bubble, all of that was going on, and developers were getting laid off in droves. And I saw that the App Store is one of these abilities for an engineer, whether he had a job or not, could make some additional cash to put food on the table for the family, send the kids to school. And that's what launched me there. That's what drove me to Apple, was this ability for people to be able to utilize the internet, use mobile computing, and make money. And I love that about it, right? For me, it was about helping out people. Right? The App Store, for me, when I joined, was all about that. Now, changed a lot over the years, right? That was 2009. And it was a really fun time to build and to work. And we helped a lot of developers out early on. It was around 2010 that my friend sent me the Bitcoin white paper, which just blew my mind. This whole idea of blockchain, whole idea of a digital currency. I had heard about it. I had thought about it a lot. We had, ostensibly digital currencies in the App Store. People would sell tokens and things like that, but you could never cash them out, right? You could make a lot of tokens in a game, but you could never get real money from that. So Bitcoin for me just blew my mind. And it was at that point that I started looking at crypto ventures in which to invest. I invested in BitGo. I invested in 21E6, which was Balaji's company before it got bought by Coinbase. And I was a big fan of that whole space. So I kept in touch. I kept keeping an eye on it. But look, I was at Apple at the time. And it was the longer I stayed there, the more I realized that I was working for the man, right? It was centralization at its utmost. And in fact, I was one of the biggest champions of it. If I was telling developers they couldn't put this app or that app onto the store because it violated Apple's rules, just got me more and more perplexed and trying to figure out what I needed to do next in my life. I'd made a commitment when I joined Apple to get the review times of these apps down to 1 day. When that happened, I left. I literally left the next day and moved to the Dominican Republic to try to figure out what we were going to do next. And suddenly, all my crypto friends started showing up on this small island in the Dominican Republic, this little town, to kite surf. And I just got thinking about identity and crypto. And that's kind of what really pushed me in this. You know, to be honest, I'm one of these guys that's always been, I would say, an anarchist, right? I was somebody that really wanted to, I didn't like to go follow the rules. I don't like being told what to do. And so for me, it was a natural progression. Web3, I didn't know it at the time, the crypto, the Web3 space, the ethos of decentralization and privacy just became so important to me. And that's one of the reasons why I moved into Web3.
Wonderful to hear you articulate those thoughts, Philip, and I can tell, that you'd be someone that would get on very well with Balaji, and fascinating to hear that you were an early investor in one of Balaji's companies, and also it's refreshing to hear you articulate that obviously the ethos, if you like, of Web3 crypto decentralization is very different from the traditional walled garden Apple experience. And perhaps we'll come back to that later in the show, because funnily enough, I just about a month ago I finished reading the biography of Steve Jobs. Second time I've read it, but it's a fantastic biography, fantastic book, and fantastic insight into the incredible work that was done and is being done at Apple, and you're obviously a part of that story. But we'll pick up the thread then. So you've left Apple. You've spent some time on the beach, kite surfing and pondering your next move. You've got this fascination with blockchain. So what happens next, and how does that kind of intersect with what would become identity.com?
Yeah, all my friends that were in the DR, people like Bill Ty and Will O'Brien, folks that are well known in the space. Will was the first CEO of BitGo, and Bill Ty's a big investor in this space. They just kept pushing this whole crypto thing towards me, and so I jumped in 2017. I jumped into ICOs, started just learning everything I could. We started thinking about, hey, somebody needs to look at these, much like I did at the App Store for apps. Maybe I create a team to start looking at ICOs and figure out which ones are valid, which ones are not, which ones are scams. And I started getting scammed, right? I mean, that was one of the things, is that you start investing in these ICOs and there was a rug pull, they disappear. And even though all the due diligence you did on LinkedIn and talking to them and on various chats, it was tough. It was tough to whittle out what was valid, what was not. And, I have a background of being stalked, of having death threats when I was running the App Store. I mean, I was outed, oddly enough, I was outed by David Copperfield, the magician, on a tweet that he tweeted my full name and said, thanks for Phillip Shoemaker for getting my app through the store. And that just blew my life up. At that point, I had death threats, I had stalkers, I had people waiting for me by my car with my picture. And so these are the kind of things that I was like, okay, I don't want anyone to deal with privacy issues like this. At the same time, I got SIM swapped, been hacked. The list goes on, right? So I was really worried about privacy and identity. But in this ICO push, when I was looking at which ones were valid or not, I stumbled upon a company called Civic Technologies, run by Vinny Lingham at the time. And I looked at that white paper as the gold standard of white papers. This is what people need to do. This is how high quality they need to be. And so I started looking really closely at that. And the thing that I got enamored with was this whole identity marketplace inside of the Civic white paper. This concept of let's drive down the cost of digital identities, of issuing a digital identity by putting them all together in a marketplace. You write to one API, and you can choose different validators based on your region or based on price or based on functionality, or, so it's all merit based. And that really resonated with me. And I ended up meeting up with Vinny. We had a chat in San Francisco at some small cafe. And by the time we walked out, we had decided to create identity.com. Let's spin out the protocols from Civic and let's build this company. And that's how I jumped in.
Okay, fascinating. Yeah, so identity.com, then I guess the idea is to build an open source decentralized platform. It offers permissionless authentication and verification for developers looking to build various decentralized applications, and of course the idea being that the end user would have control of their own data. So if that's in a nutshell, maybe talk about then what the kind of use cases that this enables and some of the problems that it solves. I guess you've kind of hinted at that already with some of the unfortunate incidents that have happened to you, Philip.
Right. I think, I think one of the points that you brought up was permissionless, that I think is really important here, right? If a company wants to validate an ID from their users, they have to, it's definitely not permissionless for most companies. You have to go to Onfido or a Socure, you sign a contract, you sign minimums, the amount you're going to pay monthly, et cetera, right? And it's a very onerous process. And what if you don't need to do 10,000 IDs a week, right, or a month? Obviously, you want something that's a little lower volume. So the thought for us was that we would bring in folks all across the spectrum. We bring in, on one side, validators that would do the identity validation. And they could be hardcore AML folks like Socure and Onfido, which are going to identify or validate your driver's license or your passport, and then do AML checks to make sure you're not a money launderer or you're on the OFAC list, those kind of things. On the other side, you have these dApps, these service providers that just want to validate an identity. And they want to make it as simple as possible with as little friction as possible, because friction is that's one of the curses in the whole identity verification, because you have to scan an ID and that's painful. But for us, the use cases were pretty simple in the DeFi space, right? Somebody wants to do a transaction, a financial transaction, selling some crypto, and the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, says that you need to store some PII along with that transaction. There has to be a customer number that people can get to. When I say people, I mean government entities and those kind, to be able to get to ultimately see who that person was, who basically validated that ID and who was in that ID. And that's kind of a hardcore use case, right? The financial piece. But there's a lot of more interesting ones. Simple ones like age check, right? We had a vending machine, Civic and Identity had a vending machine that would vend beer. And all you had to do is use our app, scan a QR code, and then validate that it's used. So doing a quick face scan. So you couldn't hand the phone to an underage person, and a beer would be dispensed once you paid. And that kind of use case was something that you typically don't see, right? You don't see novel use cases like that. Imagine another interesting use case that this kind of technology involves or allows is things like those vape pens, the Juul vape pen and others that have a lot of rampant underage vaping. Imagine if that was connected to your phone and had to validate your identity before you turned it on or as you turned it on. Those kind of things could have been easily handled with an identity type of ecosystem. But by and large, we find that anything that needs some sort of identity verification, whether it's detecting if you're a human versus a bot, whether you're unique. So in many NFT sales, people just say, I just want to sell to one person. And they instead sell to one wallet. Now, I don't know how many wallets you have, but I probably have at least 12 that I know of. And I could get 12 different NFTs if I wanted to on that. But a lot of NFT creators want to lock it down to one NFT to one human. Our technology is great at that. And if you want to go for full DeFi, AML, et cetera, you can as well. But the more interesting thing, I think, in the Web3 space is something you said before, the pseudonymous aspect of this, right? Pseudonymity, this concept of being able to work under an alter ego or play under an alter ego is super powerful in the Web3 space. You know, a lot of people are on Twitter or other places under a pseudonym because, quite frankly, they worry about what they say. They don't want to get canceled for saying the wrong thing. And we know that's super easy to do nowadays. And so you want to be able to communicate your true thoughts under a pseudonym for full freedom of expression, right? And that, to me, I think is part of the ethos as well of Web3, is just being able to speak your mind, being able to tell the truth. And so pseudonymity is critical. But what does pseudonymity need along with it? Some sort of trust, right? To trust. So what if we allowed LinkedIn or some of these other services that have some sort of identifying metrics, right? So like where you've worked, what kind of degree you've held, et cetera. What if some of that information could be bubbled up under your pseudonym in a way so it's not to be able to triangulate who you are actually, but be able to see that, yes, this is a real human. This is somebody that worked at these companies and has a degree from X or an engineering degree period. And those kind of reputational markers or signals, to me, critical to pseudonymity and super important for the Web3 space in general.
Yeah, fascinating, Philip. So it sounds like you're kind of talking about their almost like a hybrid, right, of what, you know, traditionally people would call a resume or a CV with this idea in Web3 where we have more of an on-chain reputation system. And so it sounds like there's almost kind of a hybrid model there. I'm curious, though, how do you kind of bring this all together with like a pseudonymous identity that is able to navigate the wonderful world of Web3 and have a level of pseudonymous protection, if you like, so you can be whoever you want to be. You can say what you want to say without the fear of being cancelled and have that separate from your real world identity. But how do you achieve that while also having the requisite AML, KYC, some of that stuff that is required at various levels of the DeFi ecosystem, Philip?
Yeah, I would say it first starts with self-sovereign identity and the concepts behind that, which is things like you control your identity, you hold it on your device, right, on your phone, or however you want to store it, right? So you control it, and then you control the disclosure of it. So I might be able to scan a QR code at Chase Bank to apply for a loan. And then my phone will beep, alert me saying Chase wants all sorts of information, my social security number, my name, et cetera. Now, I have the choice at that point to give it to them or not, knowing that if I don't give it to them, I won't get that loan. But at least I know what information they're asking for, and I know what they're going to do with it. And this is important for websites. I know that the UK and other places have these requirements for viewing pornography. You have to be age gated at 18 over, or at least there's laws behind this that they want to push forward. I am never going to go to a porn site and enter my ID, right? I don't know anyone who will. But imagine if there was a decentralized self-sovereign solution that did that told you, look, they're not going to get any information from you. They're just going to get a thumbs up or a thumbs down based on your age. That to me is a little more palatable. So that's the way we start. We start with the concepts of self-sovereign identity. And what identity.com does, our gateway protocol, is we generate a DID, which is a decentralized identifier. And that to me is an off-chain identity that's verified, right? And we use the trust of our identity network, so we know who's validating IDs. It can't be me validating IDs in my garage. You know, we want to work with reputable companies to make sure that there's no fraud, and that they're issuing valid identities, right? Valid attestations of a digital identity. Once that's done, you now have a DID. But what do you do with it? So what our gateway protocol also does is takes that DID and makes it available on chain. Right now we're on Solana. We understand that we have to be cross-chain for sure to be able to push this identity initiative. But you can have multiple DIDs. One could be for Phillip Shoemaker, and one could be for XYZ or whatever pseudonym I want. And then I can attach whatever If I want to connect my LinkedIn to that XYZ account, I can, and I'll be able to see the information that's going to go along with it. I can go to Hackerrank to show that I'm a skilled engineer in certain areas, that I have a 80% on the tests of JavaScript, et cetera, whatever the number is, Rust and Solidity. And you'll be able to choose each of these companies that you have an affiliation with. I could attach my GitHub to show that I've had 900,000 check-ins and I have a variety of repositories, et cetera. But at least I'm a real engineer, that I'm really doing some work here. And that's the kind of information we attach. So when I talk about validators, I'm not just thinking the Onfidos and the Socures and these heavyweights in this space, but I'm also thinking of the Hackerranks and the GitHubs to be able to integrate information about me. But you want to be able to make it vague enough that you can't triangulate me, and you want to make it robust enough that people will be able to see it and be able to make some assessment on my skills. So that's how we do it. And all this gets put into a pass. It's called an identity pass that goes into your wallet, and then people can query that pass, and you'll get a notification on your device that says, hey, this website you're connected to, they want to know this about you, and you can see that information before it gets sent, so you know what they're getting, and be able to switch IDs at that point. You're like, no, I put in my wrong one. I put in my real one. I want to put in my XYZ instead.
Fantastic. Makes sense to me, Philip. Talk then about why you've decided to make identity.com a non-profit organization, and then perhaps we can talk again about the role of Civic, Vinny's original company, and how that intersects, because I understand there's a marketplace and there's a role for the CVC tokens, which kind of brings us full circle back to the wonderful ICO days of 2017. Right. But please go.
Yeah, the nonprofit discussion was, we went through a lengthy process to figure out, first of all, where to incorporate, right? We were going to go to Zug. We looked all over, trying to figure out where the right place was to incorporate. And we settled on the States because it wasn't as crypto hostile as it is now. And so we chose to be a Delaware corporation, et cetera. And we decided to go nonprofit because the belief was, if you have a company that is basically committing to not compete with the companies that we want to onboard, right? I don't ever want to become a validator. I don't want to be a company that competes with Socure or Onfido or any of those validation companies. I don't want to do that. On the other hand, or on the other side of the marketplace, these DApp providers, these folks that are doing decentralized exchanges, et cetera, I don't want to be them either. And the problem is if I'm a for-profit company, as we see with a company like Apple, right? Apple has no such issues with competing with their customers. I do. I don't think it's the right thing to do. I don't want there to be competitors. I just want to be customers, right? And for me, going as a nonprofit saying, look, we don't plan to make a ton of money from identity validations and verifications. We don't plan to make a ton of money from this. We just need to make enough money to keep the lights on, to pay my engineers, and be able to continue putting out good product. That's all I cared about when we did this. And so that's the reason we went nonprofit. The belief was that third parties wouldn't want to jump onto a protocol that they might end up competing with. So why don't we make it a nonprofit, show that we're not going to compete with anybody, and let's just keep it that way. Now, having said that, there's a lot of identity companies out there. Most of them are not nonprofits. We chose this specifically for trying to do good in the world. I believe that there's a lot of issues in identities in general. I believe the world should have more digital identities. The US government has just created the Digital Identity Act, and that they're trying to push through the House right now. I know that members of parliament are doing the same thing in the UK. And I know Paraguay just issued a digital identity bill as well. They did that earlier this year. And so the world is coming digital, and I want to be able to support that. I want to support DeFi and the metaverse and all this space that I love so dearly, but I want to support real life as well. And doing a nonprofit allows me to more natively work with governments in general. They like NGOs, they like these type of companies over for-profit companies. So I wanted to be able to market towards them as well, to be honest.
Yep. Okay, that makes sense. Again, Philip, I like it. All right. So I mentioned there's a marketplace, and I believe that is governed with the Civic CVC token. So maybe just explain the need for that.
Yeah, so originally, if you look at the original white paper that Civic did, the marketplace and all the payments would be CVCs. And, I was a big believer in tokenized economies, a token for everything. But when you start digging into it, saying like if there was a Target coin and a Walmart coin, and I had to go through an exchange when I'd go to Target, I didn't get the product I want, I'd then have to go exchange my money to go to Walmart, just seemed kind of silly, right? So CVCs were originally intended for doing all that transactions, but we've had kind of a change of opinion there. When we spun this out of identity, and we wanted to maintain support of the CVC coin. We're a big believer in CVCs. And so for me, we wanted to prove or at least utilize the CVC in a way that made a lot of sense. And so what we ended up implementing into our white paper was use them for staking. The idea that people can come in as a validator. I talk about trust in the validation network, right? We want to make sure that these guys are on the up and up, they're doing the right things. Well, then you need to put your money where your mouth is, right? So these guys, when they come on board as a gatekeeper in our network, they need to stake a certain amount of CVC tokens. And we'll use those tokens to handle the payment of, as the payment goes through the flow, we'll pull tokens out. When you need to go through some sort of compliance checks, right? Because we're not just going to onboard companies and leave them be. They need to do annual checkups, right? We need to make sure they're SOC 2 compliance, they're PCI compliant, so they're not storing any data. We don't want any honeypots created. That's part of the reason we did this, is we want the world to have no more honeypots. And so to do that, we have to make sure that our partners are not storing that data. So we'll have to go through some audits, et cetera. And that's where the CVCs will be taken out of that as well. But at the end of the year, always got to re-up, right? You always got to keep that balance at a certain level to ensure that you're not doing things. Now, the big question is, what happens when they start validating fraudulent passports, right? That's a doozy. And when that happens, look, you got to penalize them financially. There's no doubt about it that financial hardship, financial penalties work. We know that. We saw that at Apple with things that we did with the App Store. But how many strikes is enough is too much, right? 3 strikes and you're out. If there's 3 bad IDs in the identity network, 3 fraudulent IDs that you catch, it's game over, right? To me, that's just far too many. As soon as you start having a breakdown in the trust of the ecosystem is the problem. So we're going to penalize them financially, and then it hasn't been completely worked out. But I believe on that second strike, they got to be out of the network. They got to stop issuing identities, and we got to get somebody else in their place. And the reason you do that is so they don't lose any sort of trust in the network. But look, we're working on this. We document a lot of this in the white paper. But one of the key things we put in the white paper is identity in the existing system is what's called a guardian, right? We're somebody that's overseeing the validators to make sure they're doing the right thing, that they're not robbing people, that they're not issuing or validating fraudulent IDs. But we don't want to do that forever. We want a DAO. We want to ultimately have this ruled by the people, and the people can vote and move forward with new improvement plans, et cetera, to be able to change the system, right? Change the network, require more things. So for example, one of the big things that people do in the financial world right now is they do IP address to determine if you're in the States or not. IP address to determine if you're in a certain state in the US or not. We know those don't work very well, right? We know that they're easily spoofed. I mean, I learned that at running the App Store. And so what about real location? Is that ultimately going to be a requirement for certain things? It certainly is in the gambling world. If I want to gamble out of Nevada, all of the games that are Nevada supported, they do multiple checks as you use it to make sure you're not over the border, right? And so that's something that may ultimately come to financial transactions, and our DAO will allow us to update our guidelines to ultimately support those types of things.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you for walking us through all of that, Philip. As we start to finish off this part of the podcast, I wonder if we can just touch on Apple really quickly. Because again, you kind of talked about at the beginning how Apple is centralized, right? Of course it is. It's one of the world's, I think it is the world's biggest, most valuable company, and it's got there by having extreme control over the user experience and who gets to have any influence over that. And I guess the App Store is a perfect example of that. Where do you think the kind of where do we think this is going? And what is your feeling in terms of Apple's openness to blockchain, to Web3, to decentralization? Look, I know this is a little bit of a vague, open-ended question, but just love you to reflect, if you like, Philip, on how you see this playing out, because it'll be very relevant to the likes of Google as well.
Yeah, I've given a lot of thought about what the App Store needs to evolve into, right? Even while I was there, I was spending a lot of time thinking about this, because I can't tell you how many times that we changed our mind. When I say we, Apple, changed our mind, our guidelines. And I had to call up somebody that I had developed a relationship with, that built a company of 80 people. And I had to call them up and say, we're not taking your app anymore. We're not going to allow this. And he said to me, Phil, what am I going to do? Right? I got a company in France. I got a bunch of employees. What am I doing? It's like, I don't know, but you're not doing this anymore. And I felt, it was heart-wrenching making those kind of phone calls, because if you remember, I got into it to help developers make money. And here's developers building big businesses that I have to then go and destroy, right, with one phone call. So it was really painful. And I started thinking long and hard about, should Apple be in control of this? If 50% of Americans get their news from mobile phones, 80% of Americans get their news from mobile phones, and 50% of Americans have iPhones, that's controlling half the market, right, of news. And if Apple controls everything that goes onto that device, they're essentially controlling the news. And that just, once I started reading those stats, and this was 2016, 2017, I started being very vocal about it, to the point that every time I open my mouth, I get a new cease and desist from Apple. And that's fine. I know what I'm allowed to say. I know what I'm not allowed to say. I work hard on this space. And I've testified with the House Judiciary Committee, testified with the EU. I'm going to talk to Parliament as well about some of this. I've talked to Australian government. So many governments are interested in about this whole antitrust thing, that I'm happy to speak my mind, because I truly believe that the App Store is under too much control by Apple, and it should be a DAO. Right? I'm a big believer in DAOs, especially for this space. Imagine if the developers were in control and could vote on allowing in certain types of apps. So, for example, right, Apple doesn't allow pornography. We know that, that's been there from the beginning. And I remember when we almost opened the door to pornography in the App Store while Steve was on a leave of absence. And he came back the next week and he said, I won't use the curse words he used, but he said, "We are Disney, right? We are Disney." Yes. And that's the kind of image that they want to uphold. And I get it, right? So that's okay. And maybe Apple will, if they're part of the DAO, will have an Uber vote or something, however that's done. But they denied a lot of things. So, for example, California has had legalized cannabis since 2016, but the App Store would not allow any ordering in those apps up until just recently, right? It took that long. Why? Because the head of the App Store, ultimately my boss at the company at the time, said that cannabis is a gateway drug, right? Pot is a gateway drug, I think were his words, and that if you use that, you're immediately going downhill. So fine. He felt the same way about crypto. Crypto's a Ponzi scheme. Bitcoin's a ripoff, right? How many times have we heard that from people that just don't get it? And I believe Apple still embodies that. So I'm not saying much in the way of crypto support from them for quite some time. I think it's going to be they have to change a lot of power in the House, including Tim and Jaws and the other folks that are in charge. But a DAO could solve this problem pretty easily if we just had a DAO. And this whole concept of Apple competing on an unlevel playing field, because they're competing with the Spotifys who have to give up 30%. They're competing with Netflix that have to give up 30%. They're competing with these gaming services that have to give up 30%. It's not okay, right? It needs to be changed.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And maybe just as a way of finishing off this Apple discussion, maybe it's slightly bad taste, but I'd love it, Philip. Do you want to just quickly tell the baby shaking app story and perhaps Steve's reaction to that?
I see you've done your research, have you? I was 3 weeks on the job, and an app went through the store. And we had so much protection in place. It had to see 3 sets of eyes to even see the light of day in the App Store. That's one of the reasons why it took 3 weeks to get an app submitted and then ultimately approved, was 3 sets of eyes. So fine, 3 sets of eyes saw this app, approved it, and went out to the store. And the next day, which was a Tuesday, so Apple announced earnings, which were record earnings. Eddie Q announced downloads from the App Store, amazing number of downloads. And then Baby Shaker hit the news. When I drove in that day, there were people picketing in front of Infinite Loop. And I didn't know what it was, but I immediately got a call from PR that said, hey, what did you do? Right? First thing, what did you do? And it's like, I have no idea. Went and looked at it. And it was an app that was pretty innocuous. It had a sketch of a baby. And when the baby would start to cry, you gently rock it to sleep, and it was fine. It would stop crying. And but if you shook it, you put red X's on the eyes, and because the baby died. And then it said, never shake a baby. Well, the shaken baby syndrome folks were very unhappy about that, because it's not funny, right? It's clearly not a humorous thing, although somebody thought so. And so they picketed. The news went out. Our earnings were record, our downloads were record, but our stock went down. And that was the first time the App Store had done that. That was basically April of 2009. And I sit down at my desk, I see a phone call from office of Steve Jobs. And I pick up the phone, and it was his admin, says, hey, Philip, Steve wants to talk to you. Great. And Steve just gets on the phone and says, real short sentence before he hangs up, and he says, you're stupid and you hire stupid people. And he hangs up the phone, and I just immediately start sweating. I mean, look, I had interviewed with Steve. I'd met with him a bunch of times, but that was most stern conversation I had with him. And I thought my job was gone, right? Immediately, I thought I was done for. Immediately after that, I got a call from the office of Al Gore, and I spoke to Al for a bit because he was on the board. But it all turned out good. They wanted me to fire all those people that reviewed it. We did not. I was able to, stand up and say, look, it's not their fault. These are the reasons why. This is what we'll do to improve it in the future. But Steve was a brilliant man, and very difficult to deal with at times, for sure.
Yeah, that's the impression I've got from reading his biography. But he was one of a kind, a genius. Put a dent in the universe, didn't he?
That's right. That's right. That's one of the things that I live by now. I tell people, it's like, I want to put a dent in the universe. I want identity. I want us to make a dent in this world and do something good. Somebody said to me, she said, it was a 90-year-old lady who was a mother of a friend of mine. And she said, the iPhone, she says, kids are only on their phones now, and they're always looking down, and they're not interacting with people. And you help change the world in a negative way. And I agree. I see that everywhere I go, or did at the time. And the App Store helped do that. And she said, what are you going to do about it to help rectify those problems? And while I can't solve that problem in and of itself, I want to put good in the world. And that's part of the reason why we did identity. It's because I want to help solve some of these problems for the people that are onboarding on the web, people that are getting born. Let's create some identities, some digital identities that can't be, so people can't get human trafficked. So we get slavery out of the supply chain. And all of this could be solved by adding little checks of identity along the way, not in an intrusive way. I'm not asking to see anybody's papers. It's just being able to add things to the supply chain, or be able to add, put digital identities into the world so a human trafficker can't steal your paper ID and traffic you. For me, there's better ways of solving this problem. And I think decentralized identity is the way to go. So look, I want to make a dent in the universe just like Steve did.
I love it. All right, let's go to a very quick break and then we'll come back. We'll have some fun. We'll finish off. We'll run Phillip through the very famous Crypto Conversation hot take round.
Here's what's being said about Masterworks.
My name is Jacob N. I'm from Long Island, and I've invested over $73,000 with Masterworks. My portfolio performance just wasn't cutting it. I researched all these alternative investments, like crypto and NFTs, but they didn't make sense to me. Then I read about Masterworks in Forbes, and I signed up right away. And now you can too. Thanks, Masterworks.
Get VIP access at masterworks.io and use promo code JACOB. See important disclosures at masterworks.io/DC.
And boom, we are back, and I'm with Phillip Shoemaker. Phillip, as you will have heard, is the former Apple App Store director and now executive director at identity.com, the non-profit organization pioneering pseudonymous on-chain identity verification for Web3. Phillip, I've really enjoyed talking to you. What I like to do is I like to finish each podcast with a quick round of rapid-fire crypto conversation hot takes. Are you up for it?
Absolutely.
All right, I'm just going to run some questions at you, Phillip. Just want kind of honest, hot take style answers. Anything, any way you want to do it. Question one is, Phillip, where would you say you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-chain opportunist spectrum?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm a Bitcoin maxi. I would say that Bitcoin to me is phenomenal technology. I've hodled since 2010 when I started buying it. I think Bitcoin's amazing. But look, I don't think it's the end all be all. It doesn't solve all the problems. We need multi-chains. We need to have a lot of support out there. Ethereum, Solana, you name it.
Yep, makes sense to me. A very pragmatic answer. What would you say then, Phillip, is your firmest conviction crypto opinion?
That's a tough one, right? So for me, my belief, I've said this for years, that Bitcoin's going to go up to be well over $1 million per coin at some point in my life. I know that. I believe that strongly. But if I'd say my strongest conviction is that Bitcoin is crypto is the Wild West. It's the Wild West. And that's the thing I love about it. As I said earlier, I'm kind of an anarchist. I'm definitely, I like to stick it to the man if I can, but look, within reason. The Wild West, as we knew in the States, when the Wild West was happening, that these territories that were ungoverned could get away with anything for a certain amount of time before the US government came and started governing them. And so they would always say, we got to self-regulate. And so I'm a big believer in self-regulation. I think we need to get out there and get in front of the ball so we can start making these decisions and regulate ourselves, whether it's identity or something else.
Yeah, very nicely said. Okay, well, Phillip, Bill Gates famously said that we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. You'll be very familiar with this, having worked in technology for so long yourself. So look, if we cast our mind forward 10 years' time, anything you like here, blockchain, Web3, even the Apple App Store's interaction with Web3, look, what does it all look like in 10 years' time?
Web3 is going to be radically different than we see it now. I don't want to jump to the Web 5 thing that we see others doing. For me, Web3 is the user interface problems are going to be easily solved. We're going to be able to log in much faster, not with something as dangerous as your wallet. We're going to obviously have chains on different planets. We're going to be able to connect to a variety of places throughout the universe. To me, it's a future I'm looking forward to. But some of the biggest thing is I believe that blockchain and this technology is critical for forward progress of the human race, with the transparency, the openness, and with that we need new privacy rules and regulations around it, which I think we can do ourselves. But look, DAOs are going to be the ruling force. There's going to be, as Balaji says, right, the network state. There's going to be some network states. To me, we're kind of living in this, we're moving to this world of neuromancer where companies are going to create their own type of network states, and we got to stay away from those, and we got to go to ones that are more like-minded. Look, I'll live in a world of the apes, the Bored Ape Yacht Club. I'll join their network state. To me, they seem to be like-minded individuals, very, very much degens. And so for me, DAOs are going to rule the world. Network states are going to be around.
I love it. Very nicely said. And I love that you referenced a neuromancer there, because the next question is, well, it regards a quote by neuromancer author William Gibson, who famously said that the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. So with that in mind, Philip, can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people just aren't really aware of it?
Look, I look at a part of the world and things that you and I take for granted with the internet connectivity, et cetera. A lot of the world doesn't have this, right? So that's one area, but stuff that I haven't seen. Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't have, to me, the Neuralink and things like that, where we have machine-human interface, that's here. I know people have that technology. I've just never gotten my hands on it.
Totally. All right. Time to, as we start to finish off, it's time to zoom out, time to get weird just for a second. Philip, what do you see as the long-term future for the human race? Do you see dystopia or utopia?
Well, I'm a huge fan of dystopian books and movies. Vinny and I share that. That's one of our things that we like to geek out about. I don't think I want to live that. Right? I don't think I want to live that. To me, I am an optimist by nature. I see more of a utopian ideals, whether that means a universal basic income for the world, free power, free internet. I'm not sure, but I see us going to a place where we're going to be able to, certain regions, certain network states are going to be able to have that. And so I believe that if you choose the right network state in which to live, you'll be in a utopia.
I love it. And it brings us very nicely to our final question, Philip, which is, what is your favorite science fiction book, film, or TV show? So please feel free to share some of your favorite dystopian science fiction.
Well, I tell you, Neuromancer, I have to say, hands down, is my favorite book, a favorite science fiction book of all time. I got it at a very important, critical time in my life. I was well into computers and trying to make VR at the time when that book came out. And so for me, which was a while ago, right? So you'll know. And I was just a fanatic of Neuromancer. So William Gibson, huge fan of. I'd say the latest series I saw recently that I really loved, and I wish there was more, was The Expanse. I think The Expanse was a brilliant series, a pure science fiction type of series. And for me, that was the kind of first one I've seen in a while that really made a lot of sense.
Yeah, nice. What about, have you seen Raised by Wolves?
Yes, I have. I have. I mean, very curious. I like the, first of all, I like how the cyborgs or robots or whatever they're called in that movie, how they perform, etc. And look, total dystopian. I mean, they went to another planet and still had problems. So yeah. I loved it.
Awesome, me too. Fantastic. Really, really enjoyed talking to you, Philip. Thanks for spending some time with us today. Nothing else to say really, except hand the metaphorical microphone back to you, your good self. Please tell the people where they can find you on Twitter or wherever else you like to hang out online. And if people want to engage with identity.com and what you guys are building there, what should they do? Where should they go?
Yeah, the best way to get in touch with me is I'm PBS Identity on Twitter. Our company is just Identity on Twitter. And our URL is just www.identity.com or .org. It goes to the same place. And that's the best way to get in touch with us and reach out, et cetera. Now, on our website, we have our white paper. We're about to release a new website, as well as our Discord links as well. So we want to get people onto our Discord, start talking about identity. Let's help us build the future.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Philip. All the best, and bye for now.
Thank you, Andy.
All right, there you go. That was Phillip Shoemaker from identity.com. Man, I really enjoyed talking to Phillip. That was one of my favorite podcasts in recent times, I reckon, just because Phillip's a good talker and some great stories from his time at Apple. It's just coincidental that I happened to reread the Steve Jobs biography, as I say, about a month ago. And man, it's such a good. It's a famous autobiography because. Well, it's just because Steve was such an influential figure on the world, on technology, how we live our lives, really. I mean, I'm looking at my Apple MacBook and my iPhone as we speak. So, yeah, certainly one of the more influential figures of our world. But, as Phillip rightly said, there's kind of a dark side to that as well, because now we're all hopelessly addicted to our iPhones. And it's not just obviously Apple's fault. It's social media, right? Twitter or whatever your social media of poison is. But let's not sully the end of this podcast with such negativity, because I thought, again, really enjoyed talking to Phillip. So would hope to have him back on the show again, and certainly wish him luck with what they're building at Identity. And fascinating his idea of, could the App Store be turned into some kind of DAO? So it's a bit fairer, really. It's a bit more of a positive force for good rather than a purely business profit-making endeavor. I mean, look, Apple's the most valuable company in the world. They know how to make money. So, yeah. At the same time, can you see them giving that up to form a DAO? Be a bit of a tough sell, I think. But look, you got to start somewhere. Crazier things can happen. That's the power of technology, exponential growth. I would suggest, Phillip, get Balaji on the case. He'd certainly be on board. Anyway, let's end the show there. If you did enjoy the show, please do make sure you subscribe to the Crypto Conversation so you know when each new episode drops. Please do give us a 5-star rating in the Apple App Store. Funny how that works. Or Apple iTunes or on Spotify. We'd really appreciate it. All right. Hey, again, thank you for listening. From me to you. Cheers. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave New Coin. See ya.